class. I just want to talk to you a little bit today about the case method coach. I was going to go through some specifics on my whiteboard, but for some reason it's showing up backwards. So I'm going to figure out how to make sure that you can see the whiteboard and that the words aren't backwards. So I want to talk about a couple of quick things. You all did a good job on your case method assignments. There was several. And I know there was some repeat, but I just wanted to make sure to hit a couple of things home. The first thing is making sure that you are aware of the three different types of cases. So of course the decision-making case. So this is a case where there's going to be a choice, some type of decision to be made between sets of alternatives, looking at a specific protagonist, a sport manager, some type of a decision maker. The easiest way to recognize these cases is that there's sort of a set of alternatives presented to you. So if you see the case say the protagonist can choose A, B, or C, it's likely that it's a decision case. The second one is a problem case. As you probably read and you recognize, you're going to be presented with a problem and you're going to have to come up with solutions. So in this type of case, usually you will not be provided A, B, or C. That's something that you're going to come up with, is A, B, or C as your solution options. You're going to formulate those solutions yourself. And then the third type of case that we're going to see in this class is an evaluation case. The evaluation case is usually the easiest to identify because it provides you with a lot of information, charts, a lot of data, a lot of specific different types of images, graphs, etc. Usually you'll have to do some type of analysis of that data. That's the easiest way to recognize whether it's an evaluation case. Oftentimes students ask, can the case be both a decision and an evaluation? Of course, you're going to evaluate the data and then you're going to make the decision about the best course of action based on the data that's provided to you. So what do you do with the case? Of course, we discuss it. Of course, we might write an essay about it. We might create a presentation. In this class, there's only one presentation, so you're not going to be doing that, but you are going to be utilizing the information from your cases to generate information and ideas regarding your proposal. And we are going to do discussions of cases, but questions, quizzes, etc. It does talk about our role. We talked about this in class, so I'm not going to reiterate that. The things I want to get to is this section here, where we're looking at the ways in which we analyze a case. So the first one is the intern dilemma. There's two sections of it. You're going to read both section A and section B. And the first thing that you're going to do is get oriented. So I think I discussed this a bit in class, but getting oriented is the skimming and the scanning, gathering the materials. Sometimes you'll highlight the bold. Maybe you'll just sort of look for the questions that you're supposed to be answering. Recognizing who the decision maker or the protagonist is. Read it. This particular case analysis coach says to read it once, sort of quickly, and then read it again so that you can get familiar with the content. I'll be happy if you read it once, but I think that I want you to think about it and do what is most convenient and conducive for you in your learning. So sometimes, like I do really well if I write notes in the margin. Somebody else might be really good with a highlighter, so they highlight things that stand out to them. Or maybe you ask questions as you're going, or maybe you're an underliner, or maybe you're the type of person who takes notes on the side. Whatever you need to do to familiarize yourself with the content so that later when we come back to look at it, you can provide that information. So that's saying have your tools ready. Here you can see there's actually a cup of coffee, so if you need to have your coffee. You can also use this case analysis worksheet. Let's see if it opens. My computer's giving me a little trouble today. Yes, so this is a nice little worksheet that will help you if you're kind of just looking to work through the case. Define the problem, list the concepts, what are the two types of data? So is there some qualitative data? Are there numbers? Or is there type of evidence that I need to or I'm sorry, is there qualitative data? Is there some kind of opinion-based information? or is there quantitative numbers, charts, etc.? What do you think? And then what are some alternatives? So this is what you're going to be asked to do in every case. So this little worksheet is helpful. Don't have to do it though. I don't typically make students fill it out. So then you're also going to, after you get oriented with the case, the next step is to, well, defining the problem. If it's a problem case, defining the problem or recognizing what type of a case it is part of getting oriented, because then you're going to know how to solve those problems. So the second step is to identify problems. This is sort of the dig deeper. This is where you're going to be looking for that qualitative or quantitative information. Oftentimes I get the question of does qualitative or quantitative, which is more important to a case? And the answer to that is they are both equally as important. It really depends on the scenario. So if thinking about it from the perspective of if I'm an HR manager, I might be looking at the qualitative data, which is your coworkers' perception of you or the interactions that you have with your clients. But I also might look at the quantitative data, which is maybe some performance scores that you received on your evaluations. So equally as important, but you can perhaps make a decision as the decision maker, if I'm a hiring manager or a firing manager, what I'm going to do based on both qualitative and quantitative information that's presented. So you're also going to want to recognize what the problem statement is or what the overarching issue is. Inevitably in class, I'm going to say, what's the overarching issue, or what's the summary? If you can summarize the case into 2 sentences, what does that look like? And sometimes that's hard to do. The longer the cases go, the harder it is to sort of summarize the case and what we're supposed to be looking at and evaluating in 1 or 2 sentences. Thinking about assumptions, thinking about generalizations, thinking about trial and error, making sure that you're really identifying what is it that this particular case is trying to tell you. Oftentimes, as I mentioned, you might come to class thinking that this case is about firing somebody, and somebody else might come to the class thinking that the case is really about evaluating the person in order to give them a promotion. Maybe they're both right. So sometimes it's a little bit challenging to know exactly what it is that we're supposed to be looking for in the case. So after we get oriented and we identify problems, then we want to perform some type of analysis. And this is where we're really gathering all of the information that we think is the most relevant to the problem. So again, you might be presented with a lot of information in this case, and only a small percentage of it is really necessary for you to make a decision and or to make recommendations. So you want to evaluate the relevance of the information and make sure that you are looking at the subjective and objective information that's really going to be most important to examine for this particular problem and or decision that needs to be made. Revisit, refine, and reflect, which is one of your questions. Oftentimes, once we sort of come up with we've identified the problem and maybe we think that there might be solution A, B, or C, when we go back to the problem, we might recognize that solution A really makes the most sense. So recognizing the importance and the relevance of, and maybe adding some applying judgment to it in order to perform your analysis. And this reflects, again, going back to which of the data that is presented to you is really something that you want to look at and evaluate. And then finally, after we're performing the analysis, we want to, it's next here we go, come up with an action plan. Now, this is sort of what are the next steps moving forward. So we've recognized the problem, we've come up with solutions, or we've evaluated the 3 decisions. Which of the 3 decisions make the most sense, and why do they make the most sense? So you're sort of looking at recommendations and or actions that are next. So this is sort of the plan to move forward. Thinking about the goals of the protagonist or the organization, thinking about what are we trying to achieve, and making sure that you're considering all of the information that you were provided. Anytime you're making recommendations or thinking about an action plan, you always want to think about, do we have the people to do said thing? Can we solve this problem? Do we need to identify some of these other types of scenarios? Now, some of our cases will not require us to look at the SCEAMS acronym. Space, cash, helpers, equipment, materials, expertise, systems. This is just a good way for us to really think about if we're coming up with a plan, we've solved the problem or we've made a decision. In our case, what are the next steps? Do we have the money? Do we have the people? Do we have the facilities? Is there expertise that we need to hire outside? So these schemes might come up in certain answers when we're looking at our recommendations and our future decisions as it relates to the problem. So it's a way to sort of finalize the process. So when you answer your questions that you submit to me online, most of those don't have the decision alternatives, the action plan, or the recommendations. That's something that we're going to likely have more discussion about as we come to class to discuss it, or as we're doing an online discussion board. That's where the action plan, the recommendations, the solutions and or decisions are going to come into play. Make sure I'm not missing anything. Okay, so as far as analyzing a case, hopefully this video was a little bit helpful to think about what we're going to be doing with cases and how we're going to utilize cases. So our first case that we're going to do is going to be the intern's dilemma, and that one is short. So you should be able to identify what type of a case it is pretty easily, come up with a problem statement pretty easily, and then really look through what are the pieces of information that are provided and why are those pieces of information provided, and how the ultimate, how the decision is made at the end. Okay, I will see you all soon. Thank you.